The courtroom was tense, the air thick with emotion and silence. Every seat was filled, some by the press, others by social workers, detectives, and a few concerned members of the public who couldn't tear themselves away from the trial that had gripped the town. At the center of it all sat a fragile 7-year-old girl named Emily Rose Carter. She was so small in the witness box that the court had provided a booster cushion to help her sit properly. Her legs dangled, not touching the floor, and her small hands clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit that was nearly the same size as her torso. She hadn't spoken since the moment she was brought into the courtroom that morning. Not a word. Not even a nod or a shake of her head. Just blank, glassy eyes fixed on some invisible point in space. Her father, Richard Carter, sat at the defendant's table in a tailored suit, face expressionless. If there was any fear, regret, or remorse, it was hidden deep beneath a layer of icy detachment. He glanced at Emily occasionally, but otherwise focused on his lawyer. He had denied everything. The bruises, the long nights she cried in fear, the trauma that had taken her voice. She's just a sensitive child, he had said, prone to nightmares and stories. But the stories didn't seem imaginary to anyone who had seen the medical reports, or the crime scene photos, or the trembling child who now refused to speak. The problem was, without her testimony, the case was fraying. There was physical evidence, yes, but it wasn't enough. It lacked the final thread to tie everything together. And no one could force a traumatized child to speak if she wasn't ready. The prosecutor, Ms. Daniels, stood and gently approached the bench. "Your Honor," she said carefully, "we request a brief recess. The witness is clearly under emotional distress and may respond better with additional time." The judge, a patient but visibly concerned woman in her 60s, nodded slowly. "Granted, 15 minutes. She banged the gavel lightly and called the courtroom to recess. Everyone stood. Some stretched. Others whispered. Emily didn't move. Her rabbit slipped slightly from her hands, but she quickly grabbed it again, holding it like a lifeline. Her mother, seated in the front row, dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She wasn't allowed to approach, but her face was filled with silent encouragement. In the hallway outside, Ms. Daniels was pacing when Officer Ramirez approached her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore the uniform of the local K-9 unit. At his side was a large German shepherd with deep brown eyes and a calm, almost human, expression. "This is Rex," Ramirez said. "We've been working with trauma victims for 2 years. Thought it might be worth a try." Ms. Daniels hesitated. "A dog? He's not just any dog. He's trained to detect emotional distress smells, body language, heartbeat variations. He's worked with several child witnesses before. Sometimes just his presence calms them enough to open up." Inside the courtroom, the judge returned early from recess and allowed the request. The courtroom doors opened again, and in walked Officer Ramirez and Rex. All eyes turned. Whispers fluttered like leaves in the wind. Emily's head lifted. Her eyes met Rex's. Something shifted in the room. For the first time all day, her expression changed. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Her lips parted slightly. Her grip on the stuffed rabbit loosened just enough to let her place it on her lap. Her back straightened. A flicker of awareness sparked in her eyes. She didn't look at the crowd, the judge, or even her mother. She looked only at the dog. Ramirez gave a simple hand signal. Rex calmly approached the witness stand, tail low, posture relaxed. He didn't bark or make a sound. He simply sat beside Emily and rested his head on the edge of the bench. Emily looked at him, then pointed, and whispered 2 words. "He knows." It was barely audible, but loud enough for the microphones to catch it. The courtroom froze. A collective breath was held. The judge blinked. The prosecutor stared. In disbelief, Officer Ramirez tilted his head. Did she just say? The judge raised her hand, silencing everyone. Emily, the judge said softly, can you tell us what Rex knows? Emily didn't answer. Instead, her hand gently touched Rex's head. He stayed still, his gaze locked on her. She took a shaky breath. Then she looked directly across the courtroom at her father. Everyone followed her gaze. Richard Carter's face was still unreadable, but his fingers clenched the edge of the table. A twitch of his jaw, a flicker of unease in his eyes. It was quick, but not unnoticed. Then something incredible happened. Rex stood. No command had been given. He walked slowly, past Emily, past the jury box, and directly toward Richard Carter. He stopped 2 feet away and stared. No bark. Just a low, quiet growl. The kind that said he recognized something foul. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the defense attorney shifted away from the defendant. The judge's gavel struck hard. Court is in session. Ms. Daniels stood, eyes wide. Your Honor, we request that Officer Ramirez explain the behavior of the K-9 in response to the child's statement. And so began the unraveling of a case that had teetered on the edge of failure, until a silent child found the courage to speak through the trust of a dog. The moment Rex growled, the mood in the courtroom transformed. No longer was it just a trial suddenly. It became a standoff between truth and denial. The judge, startled but composed, signaled Officer Ramirez to approach the stand. The courtroom, now completely silent, watched as the experienced K-9 handler took the witness box. Rex seated calmly beside him. Explain this behavior, the judge requested, gesturing toward Rex, who was still staring down the defendant like he'd identified a predator in disguise. Officer Ramirez nodded. Your Honor, Rex is a trauma response dog, specifically trained to detect and respond to psychological distress, scent triggers, and emotional trauma signals in children. His growl was not random. It's what he does when he recognizes a familiar, traumatic scent, something he's been conditioned to detect in past abuse cases. The defense attorney rose. With all due respect, Your Honor, dogs aren't qualified to give legal testimony. This is emotional theater, not evidence. Before the judge could respond, Ms. Daniels, the prosecutor, stood. Your Honor, the dog's behavior directly followed the child's first and only verbal communication in weeks. 2 words. He knows. That dog reacted to a stimulus, and we believe it's related to scent ascent only the abuser would carry. We ask that the dog's training background and past case history be submitted into record. The judge, known for her composure and fairness, looked down at Emily, still stroking Rex's head. Request granted. Proceed. Officer Ramirez presented a documented history of Rex's service. 3 years on the force, dozens of successful interventions with abused children, and 2 court cases in which his behavior supported breakthrough. Disclosures. Each time, his instinct had led to confessions, arrests, and justice. Still, some jurors remained skeptical. One leaned forward, eyes narrowed. So, the dog knows something. But how does that help if the child still won't speak clearly? As if on cue, Emily looked up. Her hand trembled, but her voice, though faint, was clear. He came into my room. Always after that smell. The courtroom held its breath again. Miss Daniels gently approached. Emily, can you tell us more about that smell? Emily nodded slowly. It's like burning leaves, but sweeter. I used to smell it before the door creaked. Ramirez's eyes widened slightly. He turned toward the prosecutor. That description matches a discontinued cologne briar smoke. It's rare, but Rex was trained on it during a trafficking investigation last year. The scent was used by a known perpetrator to cover traces. The judge gestured for the evidence box. Officers handed over a sealed bag containing Richard Carter's blazer, collected the morning of the trial. Ramirez opened the bag slightly and held it near Rex. Without hesitation, Rex barked once. Loud, sharp, and sudden. The courtroom gasped. That behavior was part of Rex's final training alert confirmation of a match. Richard's face twisted, not in fear, but in irritation. "It's just cologne," he muttered under his breath, too low for most to hear. But the damage was done. Miss Daniels took her moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this child hasn't spoken in weeks. Today, in the presence of this dog, who has been trained to detect emotional trauma and specific triggers," she said, "he knows." She pointed at the dog, but the meaning was clear. The dog recognizes something she has tried to forget. And when presented with her father's jacket, the dog confirmed it. The defense attorney tried to object. "This is still circumstantial. Sense, reactions, this isn't DNA." The judge raised her hand. Overruled. This reaction from the child, paired with the dog's trained behavior and the connection to a rare scent, warrants further examination. Emily was led out for a break. Her therapist joined her in a private room, where Rex followed and curled up beside her again. Her mother, though still not allowed in the room during testimony, was permitted to wait just outside. The judge declared a short recess to give the jury time to digest what they had just seen. Outside the courtroom, whispers turned into full discussions. Reporters typed furiously. Spectators were already debating what kind of dog could possibly turn the tide of such a difficult trial. But inside the minds of the prosecution team, they knew this was more than just a fluke. It was the crack they needed to pry open the truth. Back inside, the next move was strategic. Ms. Daniels brought in Dr. Lena Whitmore, a child psychologist specializing in nonverbal trauma responses. She had reviewed Emily's case file and had interviewed her months earlier before her silence fully took hold. Dr. Whitmore spoke to the jury about the connection between scent memory and trauma. Children, particularly those experiencing abuse, often associate trauma with sensory cues, smells, sounds, lights. For Emily, that specific cologne was more than just a smell. It became the warning sign of something horrible. Her brain made a connection smell equals danger. That's common in PTSD patients. She looked toward Rex. Now, imagine that scent was never discussed with her. And yet the dog, trained on that same scent in past cases, instantly reacted. It's not coincidence. It's neurological science paired with behavioral training. The jury listened, some nodding slowly. The courtroom was no longer debating whether the dog's reaction meant something. The question now was how deeply that connection ran. Later that afternoon, Ms. Daniels made a bold move. She asked the court to allow Emily to watch a recorded video taken from the hidden nanny cam installed in the hallway outside her bedroom months before the arrest. Though the video didn't show any abuse directly, it captured Richard Carter entering her room late at night on multiple occasions, always shortly after spraying something near the doorway. The court watched in silence. The soft hiss of the ink spray, the creak of the door, and the eerie stillness afterward. Enough to raise eyebrows. Enough to give weight to Emily's fear. But the most devastating moment came when Rex, still seated beside Emily in the viewing room, began growling again, low, controlled, unmistakably focused, each time the man appeared on screen. Emily reached out and stroked his head. Her eyes didn't fill with tears this time. She looked stronger, more grounded. The silent bond between them had become unbreakable. By the time the video ended, the jury's faces had changed, hardened, focused. The truth was starting to rise. And it had all started with a child, a glance, and two quiet words. After the powerful video footage and Rex's unmistakable reactions, the courtroom was transformed. What had begun as a fragile child's refusal to speak had now become an undeniable force, one where instinct, science, and courage collided. Emily had cracked the silence, and the courtroom, once skeptical, was now leaning forward, fully engaged. The judge called for a brief adjournment to allow both legal teams to gather their thoughts. But the tension didn't disappear, it merely simmered just below the surface. No one could forget the dog's low growl every time Richard Carter appeared on screen. It was as if justice had a heartbeat. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Emily sat curled in a large armchair inside a private chamber of the courthouse, therapist by her side. Rex lay beside her, his head resting near her feet. She wasn't the same child who had sat silent in court just that morning. Her body language had changed, more open, more steady. The shadows in her eyes hadn't vanished, but they weren't controlling her anymore. Dr. Lena Whitmore gently leaned forward. "Emily, you were very brave today. Do you feel okay?" Emily nodded slowly. "He always wore it. The cologne. When I smelled it, I'd hide." Her mother, seated quietly nearby, wiped her eyes. Though she couldn't say anything during court, she had begged authorities to believe her daughter for months. Finally, someone did. "Do you know what the scent is called?" Dr. Whitmore asked. Emily shook her head. "No, but it makes my throat tight. And when I smell it, I feel scared. Even now." Dr. Whitmore made a note. "That's a trauma-linked memory. Your body remembers danger before your brain even has time to think. That's also how Rex helps. He picks up on those changes." Emily smiled faintly. "He knows." Those two words echoed again, and everyone in the room knew their weight. Emily wasn't just referring to a dog. She was speaking a simple truth. Someone finally understood what she'd been through, without needing her to relive it word by word. Back in the courtroom, the next witness was ready. The prosecution called Detective Lavra Gaines, who had worked on the investigation from the beginning. She took the stand confidently, folders in hand, and was sworn in. "Detective," Miss Daniels began, "can you describe what led you to investigate Mr. Carter?" Gaines nodded. "Initially, there were complaints from a neighbor who reported hearing strange sounds at night, crying, banging, and what she described as repeated whispering or pleading. When we followed up, Emily's mother confirmed her suspicions but had no hard proof. That changed when she brought us a small USB stick containing video from a hidden camera she had set up without Mr. Carter knowing. She held up the USB in a plastic evidence bag. This footage was what you saw earlier today. While not graphic, it showed a clear pattern. Mr. Carter entering the child's room at late hours, always with a spray bottle or something similar. He wore gloves most of the time. Did you test the bottle? We attempted to locate it, but could not. However, traces of the same scent were found on several of his jackets and in the hallway where the camera was placed. Were those samples cross-referenced with Rex's training? Gaines nodded. Yes, we discovered that Rex had been trained using an artificial sample of a scent compound found in a discontinued cologne called briar smoke. It's obscure, only a few bottles exist. Our lab confirmed that residue on the clothing matched the same chemical profile. The defense attorney stood. Objection. There is no proof that this cologne links Mr. Carter directly to abuse. Miss Daniels was ready. Actually, we have additional evidence. May I proceed, Your Honor? The judge nodded. Ms. Daniels handed a photograph to the detective. Detective Gaines, can you identify this? It's a receipt from an online retailer specializing in vintage colognes, dated 5 months before the investigation began. The shipping address belongs to Richard Carter. The courtroom murmured. And is this signature on the package his? Yes, it matches his known signature on his driver's license. And is briar smoke listed as the purchased item? It is. The prosecutor turned to the jury. This was not a random scent. This was deliberate. Back in the hallway, Richard Carter shifted in his seat. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. The cracks in his stoic mask were beginning to show. As if on cue, Officer Ramirez stepped back into the courtroom with Rex. No commands were given, but Rex immediately veered away from the aisle toward Richard. Once again, he stopped 3 feet away and issued a single firm bark. The courtroom gasped. Even the judge's expression faltered. Officer Ramirez, Miss Daniels said, what does a single bark from Rex indicate? Confirmation of a match. It means he recognizes a trained scent trigger from the source. Was he commanded to do that just now? No, ma'am. That was unprompted. The defense objected again, but the damage was done. Now the jury had more than a scared child's words. They had patterns, receipts, scent recognition, and a trained police dog reacting consistently without commands. The pressure was mounting. Still, Ms. Daniels wasn't finished. Your Honor, she said, we request permission to call a surprise witness. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. The doors opened. A woman entered. Late 40s. Nervous but determined. She introduced herself as Rachel Devereux, a former co-worker of Richard Carter. As she took the stand, tension thickened again. I worked with Richard for 2 years, she said. He was charming, polite, but there was something strange. He kept this small vial of cologne in his drawer. Said it was sentimental. But one time I found him sniffing it eyes closed, completely still. It creeped me out. Did you recognize the smell? Ms. Daniels asked. Yes. I asked about it once, and he told me it was called briar smoke. I never forgot the name. The final puzzle piece had clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about one girl's trauma being exaggerated. This was about a man hiding behind silence. And now that silence had been broken by a girl, a dog, and a memory that couldn't be erased. The court reconvened after a short break, and although no one said it out loud, everyone knew things were no longer in Richard Carter's favor. The once confident man now appeared increasingly anxious, shifting in his seat, occasionally whispering furiously to his lawyer. His previously calm posture had started to crumble, just as the web of silence around him had begun to unravel. Meanwhile, the gallery was on edge. News had already spread beyond the courthouse. Reporters crowded outside. Updates poured in on local TV channels, and hashtags had started trending online. Hashtag he knows, and hashtag the dog in court. But inside, it was no circus. It was deeply human. A little girl, a loyal dog, and a courtroom holding its collective breath, waiting for the next revelation. Dr. Lena Whitmore was called back to the stand. This time, she brought with her a small folder of diagrams and case notes. Dr. Whitmore, Miss Daniels began, you've heard the court. Describe the dog's reactions and the child's statements. Can you explain the psychology behind Emily's silence, and how that may connect to the presence of this specific dog? The therapist adjusted her glasses. Certainly. Emily's silence isn't unusual in cases of sustained emotional and physical trauma, especially when the abuser is a family member. In such cases, the child's brain often shuts down its ability to verbalize trauma. It's a form of dissociation, a defense mechanism. She held up a simple brain diagram. What's unique here is that Rex's presence appears to have reactivated part of Emily's emotional processing. Animals, especially trained therapy dogs, can form trust bridges much faster than humans. When Emily pointed at Rex and said, he knows, she wasn't just referring to scent. She was expressing trust. Miss Daniels leaned forward. So, in your expert opinion, would you say the dog played a critical role in unlocking this child's suppressed trauma? Doctor. Whitmore nodded. Absolutely. In this case, he was both a witness and a catalyst. From the gallery, a low murmur ran through the room. For the first time in hours, even members of the jury showed a visible shift in emotion, from analytical distance to empathy. They weren't just reviewing evidence anymore. They were watching a child climb back from the depths of fear. Richards. Defense attorney attempted a cross-examination, trying to paint the dog's behavior as coincidental, and Emily's reaction as suggestive memory implanted by adults. But the room wasn't buying it. The facts were stacking too high. When Emily returned to the courtroom, she no longer looked like the silent ghost of a little girl she had been. She was still reserved, still fragile, but there was something new in her resolve. She walked in holding her mother's hand, Rex walking close beside them. The judge addressed her gently. "Emily, are you okay to sit and answer a few more questions?" Emily nodded. This time, she took the stand without her stuffed rabbit. She had Rex instead, now lying at her feet, as if sensing this was his moment to simply be present. Ms. Daniels approached slowly, mindful of every movement, every word. "Emily, you told us earlier that you used to hide when you smelled something. Do you remember where you would go?" Emily took a breath. "The closet, or under the bed, but mostly the closet. I had pillows in there. And my flashlight." "Why the flashlight?" "Because he would turn off the hallway light and say I had to sleep. But I wasn't sleepy. I was scared." The courtroom was dead quiet. Ms. Daniels continued gently. "Do you remember what happened when you didn't hide fast enough?" Emily's hands fidgeted. Rex, without being prompted, nudged his head. Under her palm, she immediately relaxed. Her voice returned. He would yell, or pull me by my arm. He'd say I ruined his night, and I'd get in trouble if I cried. There were gasps. Even the judge looked momentarily stunned. Ms. Daniels softened her tone even further. "Emily, do you remember anything else about the smell? Was it only on your dad?" Emily nodded. "Only him. It was the first thing I'd smell before I heard the floor creak. Sometimes I smelled it even when he wasn't home, and I still hid. Why? Because my brain told me to." It was the most articulate, chilling answer anyone had heard in court that day. The judge spoke softly. "We'll take a short recess." As the jury exited and Emily was led away for a rest, Ms. Daniels returned to her desk with a heavy but hopeful heart. They had enough, now not just legally, but emotionally. Emily's story was being heard. And even though the road had been long and winding, the light was now pouring through the cracks. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Richard Carter wasn't just nervous anymore. He was panicking. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering in a sharp, urgent tone. His hands shook slightly as he reached for a glass of water. What no one knew yet was that outside the courtroom, 2 officers had begun digging further into Richard's background. With renewed momentum, they traced the briar smoke cologne purchase back even further. Not only had Richard ordered it from a vintage supplier, but he had also subscribed to a private chat forum where members discussed manipulation tactics, psychological control, and even scent-based conditioning. The officers immediately flagged the site and obtained a warrant. And just like that, the picture grew even darker. Inside court, as the day wound down, the judge praised everyone's professionalism, especially young Emily's bravery. Officer Ramirez leaned down to pet Rex as he sat obediently at Emily's feet. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. "Real good." The courtroom adjourned for the evening. Outside, the sunset cast long shadows across the parking lot. But for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't walk with her head down. She held her mother's hand tightly, her eyes focused ahead. Rex walked beside her, steps calm and confident. The truth was no longer locked away. And tomorrow, it would roar even louder. The morning sun crept over the courthouse, casting golden rays across its steps. But inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was anything but warm. Everyone arrived early. The seats were packed, the media zone barricaded, and a new buzz of anticipation filled the halls. This was the day the jury would hear everything, the full narrative laid bare. Emily, once timid and quiet, returned with her mother and Officer Ramirez. As always, Rex walked beside them. The girl's posture had changed over the last few days. She still held tightly to her mother's hand, but she no longer shrank from eye contact or ducked her head. She walked forward, chin up, like someone who had finally remembered her own strength. Court resumed right on time. The judge nodded to the prosecutor. "Ms. Daniels, proceed." "Yes, Your Honor. Today, we intend to bring together every piece of this case, from testimony to physical evidence to psychological patterns, to help this jury see what Emily has endured and why she could only say 2 words. He knows. The first item presented was a timeline. A large screen lit up beside the jury box, displaying a digital calendar with specific dates highlighted in red. "These," Ms. Daniels explained, "are the nights when neighbors reported hearing disturbances. They line up with the dates of Emily's reported behavioral regressions nightmares, crying fits, and eventually her complete silence." Then came the nanny cam footage again. This time, slowed and zoomed in to show the subtleties. Richard's cautious behavior, his quiet entry, and the distinct moment when he removed a small object from his pocket, a bottle of cologne. The jurors leaned in. "We traced that cologne," Miss Daniels continued, "to a rare discontinued scent called briar smoke, which our canine witness Rex has been specifically trained to detect due to its use in a past criminal case. Multiple samples of Richard's clothing, along with residue found in Emily's room, match this scent. And each time Rex encounters it, he responds with his trained alert." She turned toward Officer Ramirez, seated near the front. "Officer, please confirm. Did Rex respond to the jacket in this courtroom?" "Yes, ma'am." He barked once, then sat, which is his signal that a confirmed match has been detected. "Did you command him to do this?" "No, ma'am. It was instinctive. He acted on his own." The defense attempted to dismiss this with another objection, but the judge overruled them. The jury had heard it all before only now. It was irrefutable. They weren't just seeing accusations. They were witnessing patterns. Then came Emily's recorded interview with her therapist. It was carefully edited to protect her identity, but retained the key details. Her fear of the cologne, her ritual of hiding in the closet, and her consistent use of the phrase, "The smell means danger." The room fell completely still as Emily's small voice described one specific night. "I was under the bed. I had the flashlight, but I didn't turn it on because he was calling my name. He was mad. The smell came through the door before he did. That's how I knew to hide." A juror gasped softly. Miss Daniels stood again. "What you've just heard is a child using sensory memory to survive. She didn't need words at first. Her brain told her everything she needed to stay alive. The cologne became a signal. And that signal, unbelievably, was confirmed by a trained police dog who had never met her before. Next, she brought in Agent Claire Holloway, a forensic behavior specialist who had studied scent-based trauma and conditioning. "This isn't just theory," Agent Holloway said confidently. "Smell is the most powerful trigger tied to memory. In trauma cases, especially involving children, smell can unlock long-forgotten experiences or cause instant physical reactions. In Emily's case, her body learned to fear that cologne, even before her mind could explain why. It was no coincidence. Her fear was instinctual. And Rex? Miss Daniels asked. He acted exactly as expected. If anything, he confirmed the fear wasn't imagined. It was real, present, and familiar. But Ms. Daniels wasn't finished. Yet, Your Honor, we now call Richard Carter to the stand. There was an immediate shift in the courtroom. His defense attorney whispered furiously, clearly against the idea, but Richard stood anyway. For a moment, he looked like the calm, composed man from the first day. But only for a moment. He took the oath and sat. Miss Daniels walked slowly toward him, her tone neutral but piercing. Mr. Carter, do you deny purchasing briar smoke? Cologne? I bought it. Yes, he admitted. Why? I liked the scent. It reminded me of my grandfather. And did you wear it around your daughter? I wore it often, yes. I wasn't aware of any issue with that. Miss Daniels paced slightly, then stopped. So you admit that every night, around the same time when neighbors reported disturbances, you would enter Emily's room, wearing a scent she would later describe as the smell before the fear? Richard's lips parted, but he didn't respond. Do you deny that you appeared on video entering her room repeatedly without cause, sometimes late at night? He squirmed. I was checking on her. She had nightmares. Nightmares. That only started after those visits. And yet, every time she smelled your cologne, she hid. Tell me, Mr. Carter, why do you think your daughter trusted a dog more than you? The silence was deafening. Rex, seated beside Emily in the front row, sat up a little straighter. His eyes remained fixed on Richard, ears raised. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply watched. And for Richard Carter, that quiet, unwavering gaze felt louder than any outburst. Finally, he spoke. Maybe I was too strict. Maybe she misunderstood. No, Miss Daniels said, her voice sharp now. She didn't misunderstand. She survived. She endured. And when we couldn't reach her, a dog did. She turned to the jury. You've seen the videos. You've heard the expert testimony. And you've seen how this child, without saying anything for weeks, said 2 words. He knows. She didn't say it to her mother, or to the court. She said it to the one being in the room she instinctively trusted. She paused, letting the silence speak. Ask yourselves why. Then ask if justice has waited long enough. As the day ended, the jury was dismissed to deliberate. Emily, sitting in the waiting area with Rex curled at her feet, looked up at her mom and asked something she hadn't in a long time. Can we go home soon? Her mother nodded, brushing hair from her eyes. Soon, sweetheart? Very soon. Outside the courthouse, a gray sky loomed overhead, the clouds swollen with the promise of a storm. Inside, the tension was far thicker. The courtroom benches were packed again. Journalists clutched notepads and murmured into recorders. Reporters whispered updates into cameras just outside the doors. America was watching now, and they all waited for what came next. But inside the waiting room, Emily didn't care about the cameras or the headlines. She sat on the floor next to Rex, braiding one of the long strips of his leash like she was weaving a spell. Her tiny fingers moved quickly, but her eyes remained focused on the door. She wasn't scared today. She was waiting. Her mother, Lisa, sat beside her. The past weeks had aged her eyes a little dimmer, her skin a little paler, but there was something else too. A quiet relief had begun settling over her like the first breeze after a storm. It wasn't over, but it was close. Judge Halbrook entered the courtroom at precisely 9 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said solemnly, have you reached a verdict? The head juror stood, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a gentle expression. She held a slip of paper in her hands, the kind that could change lives. We have, Your Honor. The bailiff walked over and retrieved the paper, then passed it to the judge. His eyes scanned the words for a moment, and he nodded. Please, read the verdict aloud. The woman inhaled. In the matter of People versus Richard Carter, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. A collective gasp swept the courtroom like a wave. The air left Richard Carter's lungs as he sat frozen, eyes wide, mouth parted in disbelief. He wasn't expecting this. Even after the videos, even after the testimony, he thought he'd get away with it. He didn't. Lisa clutched her daughter tightly. Emily didn't react with a scream or a cheer. Instead, she simply leaned into her mother's chest and whispered, "Rex was right." Rex let out a soft bark just once as, if to confirm it, the judge tapped his gavel. "Mr. Carter, you will be remanded into custody until sentencing. Court is adjourned." As Richard was escorted away, he looked over his shoulder, not at the judge, not at the attorneys, but at the dog who had been his undoing. Rex stared back, unmoved, unflinching. Outside the courthouse, the media exploded into chaos. "Justice served today in a case that captured national attention," one reporter declared live. "A silent girl and a heroic dog, how their bond cracked open a hidden truth," another intoned. Lisa shielded Emily from the cameras. They didn't stop to give statements. They just wanted to go home. Back in the car, as Officer Ramirez drove them away from the courthouse for the final time, a heavy silence fell this time not from fear, but from exhaustion. The storm outside finally broke. Raindrops slid down the windows in quiet rivers, and Emily reached her hand out to trace them. "How do you feel, kiddo?" Ramirez asked gently, eyes on the road. Emily didn't answer right away. Then, still watching the rain, she said, "Lighter." Lisa smiled through her tears. "That's a good feeling." "Rex did good," Emily added. Rex, curled in the back seat beside her, let out a huff and licked her fingers. "He sure did," Ramirez said. "You both did." That night, their home felt different. The locks were the same. The lights were the same. But the air was clear, no longer stained by secrets. Lisa made spaghetti for dinner, Emily's favorite, and even though she didn't finish it all, she ate more than she had in months. They watched a movie afterward, curled up under a blanket. Emily laughed twice. Not much, but it was real. Later, Lisa tucked her into bed, gently brushing her hair aside. "Do you want me to leave the nightlight on?" she asked. Emily shook her head. "I'm not scared anymore." Lisa blinked, taken aback. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Rex is here." And he was. The golden retriever lay curled at the foot of the bed, eyes closed but ears alert, as though even sleep couldn't stop him from protecting her. Lisa kissed her daughter's forehead. "Good night, baby." Emily smiled. "Good night, Mama." Downstairs, Lisa sat alone on the couch and wept silent. Grateful tears for a truth finally seen, for a little girl who found her voice, and for the dog who made it all possible. The next few days brought peace, but also reflection. Detective Ramirez came by to visit, bringing Rex's service certificate and a medal awarded by the local police department. Emily clapped softly as he showed it to her, and she insisted on taping it to the fridge. "He's a hero," she said proudly. Lisa smiled. "So are you." Emily shrugged. "I just pointed." "You pointed and said 2 words that changed everything." That afternoon, they sat in the backyard together. Emily, Lisa, Ramirez, and Rex. The sun broke through the clouds again, lighting the grass with golden warmth. Emily threw a ball across the yard, and Rex chased it down, tail wagging. "Can Rex stay with us forever?" she asked. Lisa and Ramirez exchanged a glance. "Well," Ramirez said carefully, "he's technically still in active service. But I think the department would approve a transfer of care. He seems to have chosen his person already." Emily smiled. For the first time, it reached her eyes. The story had traveled across the country by then. Interviews were requested. Book deals floated into Lisa's inbox. But she declined them all. This wasn't a story for fame or profit. It was a story of survival, of healing, of quiet bravery, and loyalty that defied logic. And it wasn't over yet. One day, Emily would grow up. She'd forget parts of the fear. She'd move on from the whispers and courtrooms. But she'd never forget the moment that started it all. The moment. She looked at Rex, pointed, and said, "He knows." And the world finally listened. The courthouse was long behind them, but the journey wasn't over. Healing never happened overnight. Not for Lisa, not for Emily, and certainly not for Rex, who'd been through his own silent battles in the process. Each day afterward unfolded like pages in a new chapter, sometimes calm, sometimes heavy, but always moving forward. Lisa took a leave of absence from work. She needed the time not only to care for Emily, but to breathe again herself. The constant pressure, the late-night police calls, the interviews, it all faded, replaced by simple routines. Making pancakes in the morning, drawing chalk animals on the sidewalk, walking with Emily and Rex through the quiet streets of their neighborhood. At first, Emily didn't say much, but her silence wasn't the same as it had been before the trial. It wasn't tight or fearful. It was peaceful, observant. She spoke when she needed to, and sometimes that was enough. Lisa had enrolled her in therapy, not forced, but gently encouraged. Emily met with Dr. Ramirez, not related to the officer, a soft-voiced child psychologist who never pushed, only listened. During their third session, Emily spoke openly about the Red Room, her word for the basement where Carter had taken her. Her drawings changed from jagged black lines to soft pastels, from broken houses to whole ones, from scared faces to ones with eyes wide open. One afternoon, while Lisa waited in the clinic's small lobby, she was flipping through a magazine, when Dr. Ramirez approached her with a quiet smile. "She's making wonderful progress," the doctor said. Lisa exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You really think so?" Dr. Ramirez nodded. "She's beginning to trust her own voice again. That's the hardest part, for children who've been through trauma. But she's got something powerful most kids don't." "Her dog?" Lisa asked, already smiling. "Yes, and you." Lisa's throat tightened. Later that evening, Emily was on the living room rug, carefully brushing Rex's fur with a pink plastic comb she'd found in a cereal box. He laid perfectly still, tail thumping now and then, as if he understood it was more than grooming it. Was comfort. "Can we go to the lake tomorrow?" Emily asked. Lisa looked up from her laptop, surprised. "The lake? You haven't wanted to go there in a long time." "I want to go now," Emily said. "I think Rex would like it." The lake had been a favorite of theirs, before everything changed. Before Richard Carter. Before the courtrooms. Lisa nodded. "Okay, we'll pack lunch." The next morning was sunny and warm. The kind of day that made you believe the world could be kind again. They parked under the old oak trees by the lake, the breeze fluttering through the leaves like whispered laughter. Lisa set up a blanket, while Emily and Rex raced to the shoreline. Emily dipped her toes in the water, giggling as it lapped at her ankles. She tossed a stick into the water, and Rex bounded after it, tail wagging wildly. The splash, the shimmer, the open sky, it was freedom in its purest form. Watching her daughter play, Lisa felt something deep inside begin to release. Not the pain. That would always live in some quiet room of her heart. But the guilt, the constant questioning. Had she missed the signs? Could she have stopped it sooner? But no mother sees everything, and no monster wears a label. What mattered now was what they had done. What they had survived. "Mommy, take a picture." Emily called. Lisa pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of Emily, arms wide, with Rex beside her in the water. It captured something rare, unguarded joy. They stayed by the lake most of the day. Lunch was simple PB&J sandwiches and juice boxes, but tasted like something out of a picnic dream. When it was time to leave, Emily looked disappointed. "We can come back next week," Lisa promised. "As many times as you want." As they packed up, a woman nearby approached them with her own child. "Excuse me, is that the dog from the trial? The one from the news?" Lisa froze. She wasn't used to being recognized. She opened her mouth to answer, but Emily beat her to it. "Yes," she said proudly. "His name's Rex. He saved me." The woman blinked, clearly moved. She kneeled so her own daughter, a girl about Emily's age, could meet her eyes. "That's really brave of you to say. You're a very strong little girl." Emily just smiled and gave Rex a pat on the head. Lisa didn't cry until they were back in the car. Not because she was sad, but because she'd seen something today she hadn't dared hope for. Resilience. Not the kind you fake for the world, the kind that lives in the bones, in quiet moments. In muddy shoes and sunlit hair and a little girl, smiling at strangers again. That night, they added a new picture to the refrigerator, the one from the lake. Emily taped it next to Rex's medal. "It's his hero wall," she explained. Lisa chuckled. "What about your picture?" Emily considered. "That one goes in my room, so I remember I'm strong too." Lisa kissed her daughter's forehead. "You don't need a picture to remind you." The days continued gently. Therapy, walks, new routines. Emily started reading again, one picture book at a time. Lisa applied for part-time work with a local women's shelter, hoping to help other mothers navigating fear and survival. One night, as Lisa folded laundry, Emily came into her room holding a notepad. "I wrote something," she said shyly. Lisa took the paper and read it. "My name is Emily. I was scared before, but I talked, and Mommy listened, and Rex was brave. Now I'm not scared all the time, because people helped. And I am not alone." Lisa didn't even try to stop the tears. She pulled Emily into her arms and held her for a long time, rocking back and forth like she did when Emily was a baby. "You're never alone," she whispered. Outside the window, the moon was full. Rex lifted his head from the foot of the bed, yawned, and then closed his eyes again, knowing that for tonight, all was well. Tomorrow would come. There would be more challenges, more steps on the path to healing. But tonight, they had peace. And that was enough. 1 year later, the world looked different, not perfect, but brighter. The house was quieter now, not in the haunting way it once was, but peaceful. No more creaking floors under stress, no more sudden silences thick with unspoken fear. It was a home again. Not just a roof and walls, but a place filled with healing, laughter, and a sense of safety that had once seemed impossible. Lisa watched as Emily ran through the backyard, Rex trailing close behind her. They played tag near the garden beds Lisa had planted in the spring. Flowers bloomed where dead leaves used to gather, and sunlight danced across the green grass. Each petal, each giggle, was a small sign that life had returned. Emily had just turned 6. She was taller now, her curls longer, her voice stronger. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched if someone shouted too loud. But those moments didn't define her anymore. What defined her now were the stories she read aloud at bedtime. The way she stood confidently in front of her first-grade class to talk about her bravest day. The drawings she made of herself and Rex, smiling under a bright sun. Rex had officially retired as a K-9 officer. After the trial, he'd become too bonded to Emily to return to fieldwork. The department agreed that he belonged with her. They even held a small retirement ceremony at the station. Emily had gone, wearing a tiny police badge sticker on her shirt, and stood beside Rex as He received a Medal of Honor and a giant bone wrapped in ribbon. Lisa remembered holding back tears as the chief said, "Some dogs just know who needs them. And some people become heroes by speaking when it's hardest to do so. Today, we honor both." That moment lived framed in Lisa's living room now, right beside the lake photo and Rex's ribbon. Every time Lisa passed it, she was reminded of what they'd come through and how far they'd risen. Life didn't return to normal because normal no longer made sense. Instead, they created something new. Lisa had started working again, part-time, at the shelter. Her story, once painful to share, became a source of strength for other women who'd been manipulated by someone they trusted. She became someone others leaned on because she understood, because she'd lived through it and survived. At a local school safety assembly that fall, Lisa was asked to speak. It was the first time she stood in front of strangers to publicly share what happened. Not in a courtroom, but in a school auditorium filled with parents, teachers, and even a few teenage girls who watched her with wide eyes. "I didn't think it could happen to me," Lisa had said. "I thought because I was smart and careful and loving that no one could get close enough to hurt us. But evil doesn't always knock on the door wearing a mask. Sometimes it walks in smiling. And if it weren't for my daughter and a very loyal dog, I might never have seen the truth in time." The room had fallen silent when she spoke those words. But afterward, as people thanked her, she saw it in their faces, the understanding, the recognition, the hope. Now, as fall turned its leaves golden, Lisa sat on the back steps of the porch, a cup of tea in her hands. Emily was curled up with Rex under the maple tree, her favorite book open on her lap. She was reading aloud, voice clear, eyes sparkling. And the brave little girl knew, no matter how dark the woods had been, she had found her way back into the light. Rex's ears perked up at her voice. Emily giggled, petting his fur. "You like that part too, don't you, boy?" Lisa smiled. The words rang with truth. That night, as Lisa tucked Emily into bed, her daughter looked up and asked, "Mommy, can we go visit Officer Ramirez again?" Lisa paused, surprised. "Of course we can." "Why?" Emily shrugged beneath her blankets. "I want to tell him thank you. For believing me. For believing Rex." Lisa kissed her forehead. "He'd love that." Emily nodded. "And maybe we can take Rex. He's a real hero." "Yes, he is." Before leaving the room, Lisa turned to look at her daughter one more time. Her eyes were already drifting shut, her arms around her favorite stuffed dog, the same one Officer Ramirez had given her after the trial. Lisa stepped into the hallway, where Rex lay by the bedroom door, keeping watch as always. She knelt beside him, scratching his head. "Thank you," she whispered. He nudged her hand gently with his nose, eyes soft and steady. No bark, no wag. Just quiet understanding, the same kind that had saved a little girl's life and changed everything. In the weeks that followed, Lisa began writing a book. Not for money, not for fame, but for others who might one day walk through a similar storm and need to know they weren't alone. She titled it, 2 Words, a simple reference to the moment everything changed. The moment when her daughter pointed at Rex and said, "He knows." Those 2 words had torn down a wall, had forced the truth into the light. And now they were a symbol of something even greater, that even in silence, there is strength. That healing begins the moment someone is believed. On the book's dedication page, Lisa wrote, "For Emily, who spoke when it mattered most. For Rex, who listened when no one else did. And for every silent voice waiting to be heard." The book would one day make its way into libraries, into shelters, into homes like the one Lisa once thought she'd lost. But that was still to come. For now, there was a fire crackling in the fireplace, a story being read in the next room, and a dog curled up where he belonged. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. But tonight, peace had a name, and her name was Emily.